What if the one thing you desired most was slowly, silently killing you? What if every time you looked in the mirror, you became more beautiful, but the person staring back was a ghost of your future? This is not just a story about vanity. This is a warning about the reflection that watches you, and the terrible price it demands for perfection. In the bustling, noisy city of Lagos, there lived a young woman named Amara. To the world outside, Amara was ordinary. Her skin, marked by the stubborn memories of childhood acne, was a source of silent shame. Her nose was a little too broad for her face, her lips a little too thin. In a world that celebrated flawless skin and sharp features, Amara felt invisible, a shadow fading against the vibrant wallpaper of life. She worked as a junior graphic designer, her talent buried under the confidence of louder colleagues. Men's eyes would slide over her in the office, landing on her more glamorous friend, Kemi, whose laughter was as bright as her designer dresses. Amara's life was a quiet symphony of longing. She spent hours scrolling through Instagram, saving pictures of beautiful women, her heart a hollow ache of want. Her desire for beauty wasn't just a wish, it was a desperate, all-consuming hunger. She believed that with a pretty face, her voice would be heard, her talent seen, her life would finally begin. Her one-room apartment was a shrine to this desperation. The walls were plastered with cutouts from magazines. Her small savings were slowly bled dry by cheap creams, the expensive serums, and herbal concoctions promised by online charlatans. Nothing worked. The mirror in her bathroom was her greatest enemy and her most frequent companion. Every morning and every night, she would stand before it, searching for a change that never came, her reflection a constant reminder of her inadequacy. One Friday evening, the weight of it all became too heavy. Kemi had been crowned the trophy's queen in a silly work competition, and Amara had been asked, yet again, to be the one taking the photos. Humiliation burned her cheeks as she forced a smile. On her way home, feeling utterly defeated, she decided to take a different route, wandering through an old part of the city she rarely visited. The air here was different, thick with the smell of dust, dried herbs, and age. It was in this forgotten corner that she saw it, a tiny, cluttered antique shop tucked between a fabric store and a cobbler's, looking as if it had been misplaced by time. A strange pull, an instinct she couldn't name, drew her inside. A bell tinkled, a frail, dusty sound. The shop was a labyrinth of forgotten things. Sunlight struggled through a single dirty window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. And there, on a velvet-covered stand, was a mirror. It wasn't large, but it was breathtaking. Its frame was made of dark, intricately carved wood, woven with silver that coiled like serpents. At its crest, a single, milky moonstone gleamed with a faint inner light. It was the most beautiful object Amara had ever seen. An old woman with skin like crumpled leather and eyes that held the depth of countless years emerged from the shadows. "It sees the true you, my dear," the woman said, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. Her gaze was unnervingly direct. "It shows you not what you are, but what you could be. The beauty you deserve." Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. How much is it?" The old woman smiled, a thin, knowing curve of her lips. "For you, a special price. It does not cost money. It only costs a promise. A promise. Amara echoed, her fingers itching to touch the cool, silvered glass. A promise to cherish the gift it gives you, the woman said, her eyes glinting. To never cover it, to never hide it away in darkness. Let it see you, and you will see your true self. It sounded like poetry, not a warning. Blinded by desire, Amara agreed. She paid a token sum of money, a pittance for such a beautiful object, and hurried home with her prize, the old woman's final words echoing in her mind, remember, the mirror gives. But all gifts must be paid for. That night, in the sanctity of her bathroom, Amara lifted. Her hair grew thicker, shinier, cascading down her back in lush waves. The world began to notice. Amara, is that you? You look incredible, her manager said, his eyes lingering on her in a way they never had before. Kemi's compliments were laced with a new, sharp jealousy. What spa are you going to? You have to tell me your secret. Men asked for her number. Colleagues sought her opinion. For the first time, she was seen. She was desired. She was powerful. She had become the woman from the Instagram pictures. Life was a dazzling dream. But then the first bill came due. It started subtly. A strange fatigue that her morning coffee couldn't shake. A dull, persistent ache in her joints that she attributed to a new workout routine. She noticed a single, stark white hair at her temple, contrasting sharply with her youthful face. She plucked it out, dismissing it as stress. Then, one evening, she was getting ready for a date with Tand, a handsome banker who had pursued her relentlessly. She stood before her miracle mirror, applying lipstick, when a sharp, stabbing pain shot through her lower back. She gasped, dropping the tube. It was a deep, ancient ache, the kind her grandmother complained about. She was only 25. It made no sense. She leaned in closer to the mirror, and for a fraction of a second, she didn't see her own beautiful face. She saw a glimpse of something else, a gaunt, weary face with sunken eyes and a network of fine lines around the mouth. She blinked, and it was gone. Her own perfect reflection stared back, smirking. Her heart thudded violently. A cold trickle of fear, the first she'd felt in weeks, ran down her spine. The mirror didn't just show her beauty. For that fleeting moment, it had shown her the cost. The reflection had lied. Or perhaps, for the first time, it had told a terrifying truth. The pain in Amara's back did not fade. It settled in, a constant, grinding reminder that something was deeply wrong. The beautiful face in the mirror now felt like a mask, and behind it, a terrifying reality was beginning to crack through. She tried to rationalize it. She was working too hard. She was dehydrated. But a voice, small and cold, whispered in the back of her mind, "It's the mirror." She remembered the old woman's words. All gifts must be paid for. Panic, cold and sharp, began to replace her joy. She started avoiding the mirror, covering it with a black cloth before she slept. But the next morning, a compulsion she couldn't fight would make her snatch the cloth away, desperate to see if her beauty remained. And it did. It was always more radiant, more perfect than the day before. But now, the sight filled her with dread. The physical toll escalated. The fatigue became a heavy blanket, making even the simplest tasks feel Herculean. Climbing the single flight of stairs to her apartment left her breathless, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. She found a second white hair. Then a third. She started wearing long sleeves to hide the subtle, peppery dryness that was creeping over the skin on her arms. Her boyfriend, turned, noticed. "You look tired, my love," he said one evening, his handsome face etched with concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor. You're pushing yourself too hard." She forced a brilliant, mirror-perfected smile. "It's nothing. Just a busy season at work." But her smile felt stiff, her painted-on expression that no longer reached her eyes, which now held a permanent shadow of fear. The horror reached a new peak during a team presentation. Amara was at the whiteboard, explaining a new design concept, feeling the supportive, admiring gazes of her colleagues. She was the star. Then, a sharp, arthritic cramp seized her right hand. Her fingers, once slender and graceful, locked around the marker, contorting into a painful claw. She gasped, dropping the pen. The room fell silent. "Amara, are you okay?" her manager asked. Tears of pain and humiliation welled in her eyes. I think I just pulled a muscle," she stammered, cradling her hand, which now looked older. The skin was thinner, the veins more prominent. She saw Kemi watching her, not with concern, but with a curious, calculating glint. That night, she stood before the mirror, sobbing. "What are you doing to me?" she screamed at her reflection. The beautiful face stared back, cold and unmoved. It was her face, but the eyes were alien, devoid of the terror churning inside her. It was as if the reflection had become the real thing, and she was the fading echo. Desperate, she decided to return the mirror. She wrapped it carefully in the black cloth, her aged, aching fingers fumbling with the knots. She took a taxi back to the old part of the city, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. But when she arrived, the shop was gone. In its place was a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with rubble. It was as if it had never existed. A cold certainty settled in her soul, as there was no returning the gift. The transaction was permanent. Defeated, she returned home. The moment she unwrapped the mirror and placed it back on her dresser, a wave of relief washed over her, not emotional, but a physical sensation. The ache in her joints lessened. The crushing fatigue lifted slightly. The mirror was rewarding her for coming back. It was reinforcing its hold. It needed to see her, and in return, it would temporarily ease the suffering it caused. She was an addict, and the mirror was her drug. Weeks bled into a month. Amara, the stunning office beauty, was now a carefully constructed facade. She moved with the cautious slowness of an old woman. She hid her trembling, aching hands in her pockets. She applied more makeup to conceal the faint liver spots appearing on her temples. The vibrant, desired woman was a shell, her body aging decades in a matter of weeks, while her face remained a frozen, beautiful mask of her 25-year-old self. The dissonance was a living nightmare. The breaking point came during a visit from her mother. Mama Nkechi, a robust woman in her late 50s, took one look at her daughter and her hand flew to her mouth. Mama Nkechi, VO. Amara. Kidu ai chino mgi. What is wrong with you? You look like a ghost wearing my daughter's face. Amara tried to laugh it off, but the sound was brutal. I'm fine, Mama. Just stress. But Mama Nkechi's eyes, sharp with a mother's intuition, scanned the room. They landed on the ornate mirror. Her face paled. Mama Nkechi, VO. Where did you get that? She whispered, her voice trembling with a superstitious fear Amara hadn't had since childhood. That thing, it has an evil eye. I can feel it. It is sucking the life out of you, NWAM. You must get rid of it. For the first time, someone else had seen it. The secret was out. The beautiful reflection in the cast mirror was no longer just Amara's private hell. The truth, spoken aloud by her mother, shattered the last of Amara's denial. The beautiful mask she wore now felt like a death shroud. Mama Nkechi's fear was a contagion, filling the small apartment with a palpable dread. Get rid of it, Amara. Now, her mother insisted, her voice cracking with urgency. She moved towards the dresser, her hand outstretched to seize the cursed object. No. Amara screamed, the sound raw and desperate. She lunged forward, placing her own body between her mother and the mirror. A violent, possessive energy surged through her. You don't understand. I can't. If I get rid of it, I'll lose everything. Mama Nkechi stared at her, horrified. She wasn't just looking at a stubborn daughter, she was looking at a soul in thrall. What will you lose, NWAM? Your life? Look at you. You are bending over like an old woman. Your hands shake. Is this beauty? This is a disease. But Amara was no longer listening. The mirror's pull was a physical force, a siren song whispering promises of eternal perfection, if only she would defend it. The argument was fierce and tearful, ending with Mama Nkechi storming out, vowing to return with a pasta. The moment the door slammed, a profound silence fell, broken only by Amara's ragged breaths. She turned slowly, compelled to face the mirror. Her reflection was flawless. More than flawless, it was radiant, glowing with an otherworldly vibrancy. It was the face of a goddess. And it smiled at her, a slow, cruel, knowing smile that her own physical lips did not mirror. The reflection was no longer just a reflection. It was becoming its own entity, and it was pleased with her loyalty. The temporary relief she felt after defending the mirror was intoxicating. The pain vanished. The fatigue lifted. For a few glorious hours, she felt like the woman she appeared to be, young, vibrant, powerful. It was a trick, a reward for good behavior, and she fell for it completely. She convinced herself her mother was just being superstitious. The mirror was her savior. But the respite was short-lived. The next morning, the price was higher. She woke up to a searing pain in her hip. When she tried to get out of bed, her leg buckled, then she fell to the floor with a cry. Lying there, on the cold tiles, she saw them clearly, deep wrinkles etched around her eyes and mouth, visible without the soft morning light. Her beautiful face was still there, but it was now superimposed over a map of age. It was like looking at two people at once, the young, stunning Amara, and the old, dying woman she was becoming. She dragged herself to the mirror, using the dresser to pull her aching body up. The reflection showed only the beauty. It was a lie. A beautiful, monstrous lie. Her social life crumbled. She cancelled dates with turned, making flimsy excuses. She stopped going out with colleagues. The outside world was a threat, it might see the truth behind the glamour. She became a prisoner in her own home, with her jailer being the very object she worshipped. The final, undeniable horror struck on a Tuesday. She was on a video call with a client. She was using a filter, of course, to ensure she looked perfect. Mid-sentence, her connection glitched. The filter flickered and dropped for a single, horrifying second. On the screen was not the beautiful Amara. It was a woman in her late 70s. Her skin was a web of deep lines and sagging flesh. Her neck was corded and thin. Her eyes, sunken in their sockets, were clouded with pain and fear. It was her. Her true self, aged by the mirror's relentless hunger. The client gasped. "Amara? Is everything all right? You look unwell." She fumbled, her ancient fingers clumsy on the keyboard, and ended the call. She sat in the silence, trembling uncontrollably. There was no more denying it. The mirror wasn't just stealing her youth, it was fast-forwarding her life, consuming her years in exchange for a fleeting, hollow beauty. She was dying. She was dying while looking more alive than ever. Driven by a primal survival instinct, she knew what she had to do. She wouldn't just cover it. She would destroy it. That night, under the cover of darkness, she took a heavy hammer from her kitchen drawer. Her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic, young rhythm in her aging body. She stood before the mirror, the tool of her salvation, or her damnation, clutched in her frail, wrinkled hand. The beautiful face in the glass stared back, its expression shifting from its usual placid perfection to one of cold, menacing warning. She took a deep, rattling breath, raised the hammer high, and with a scream that tore from her very soul, she swung it with all the strength her stolen life had left. The sound was not just of breaking glass. It was the sound of a universe cracking. A shockwave, silent and invisible, erupted from the dresser, throwing Amara backward onto the floor. For a moment, there was only stillness, and the glittering, countless shards of the mirror raining down like malevolent stars. Then, the pain came. It did not come slowly, as it had before. It was an avalanche. A crashing weight descended on her chest, making her gasp for a breath that wouldn't come. Every joint in her body, from her fingers to her spine to her knees, screamed in simultaneous, fiery agony. It was as if a lifetime of decay, held at bay by the mirror's magic, had been unleashed upon her all at once. She tried to push herself up, but her arms were weak, brittle twigs. Her vision swam, blurring the fragments of the mirror on the floor. With a trembling, desperate effort, she crawled towards the largest piece, her body moving with the stiff, painful slowness of the very old. What she saw in that fractured shard stole the last of her breath. Gone was the beautiful mask. Gone was the perfect skin and the luminous eyes. Staring back at her was the face she had glimpsed on the video call, but worse. It was the face of a woman not just old, but ancient. Her skin was translucent parchment, stretched tight over a skull mapped with 1,000 deep crevices. Her hair, what little was left, was a wispy, shock-white halo. Her eyes were clouded milky blue, sunk deep in dark sockets. A dry, rasping sob escaped her lips. This was her. This was the true cost of her vanity. The miller hadn't just been stealing her future, it had been a loan shark, and she had just called in the entire debt at once. But the horror was not over. As she stared, paralyzed by the sight of her own ravaged face, the reflection in the glass shard moved. It smiled. It was the same cold, knowing smile she had seen before, but now it was on the face of a crone. The eyes in the reflection, though milky, held a sharp, malicious intelligence. They were not her eyes. A voice, not her own, but the dry, rustling whisper of the old woman from the shop, seemed to emanate from the shard itself. A promise is a promise, my dear. You promised to cherish the gift, to never hide it away. You broke our bargain. The beauty was never yours to keep, it was only ever on loan. And now, the loan is due. The voice faded, and the reflection in the shard winked out, becoming just a piece of broken glass. Amara collapsed onto the floor, her body racked with pain and terror. She was a 90-year-old woman trapped in a nightmare, her mind still that of the 25-year-old who had made a foolish, desperate deal. Downstairs, the buzzer to her apartment rang, sharp and insistent. Then came the pounding on her door. Amara. Amara, open this door. I've brought Pastor James. Open up. Mama Nkechi shouted. But Amara could not answer. She could only lie amidst the ruins of her vanity, a living ghost, listening to the sounds of a world she could no longer be part of. The door shuddered under the force of their knocking, a frantic rhythm against the slow, failing beat of her aged heart. The door gave way. Mama Nkechi and Pastor James burst into the apartment, their faces etched with urgent determination. But that determination froze, solidifying into pure, unadulterated horror. They did not see the beautiful Amara they expected. They did not even see a sickly young woman. Lying on the floor amidst the glittering shards of the broken mirror was a skeletal ancient crone. Her white hair was thin, her skin clung to her bones like brittle paper, and her hands, curled like claws, trembled uncontrollably on the floor. Mama Nkechi, gasping. No. No. Amara. My baby, what has it done to you? Mama Nkechi rushed forward, falling to her knees, but hesitating to touch the fragile, ancient thing that was her daughter. Pastor James, a tall man with a stern face, recoiled, making the sign of the cross. His eyes swept the room, filling the thick, oppressive residue of dark magic. The old woman on the floor stared. Amara's clouded eyes fluttered open. She tried to speak, but only a dry, rattling whisper emerged. Amara, weak, aged voice. Mama. I'm sorry. Pastor James stepped forward, his voice booming with authority, but laced with a tremor of fear. A powerful demon of vanity is attached to this object. It has fed on her life force. We must pray now. We must cast it out. He began to pray, his voice rising in a fervent chant. He sprinkled anointed water around the room. But as the holy water touched the shattered mirror fragments, they did not sizzle or steam. Instead, they seemed to absorb it, the silvered glass darkening like a stormy sky. A cold wind, smelling of dust and grave soil, swept through the sealed room. The shards of glass on the floor began to vibrate, lifting into the air, spinning slowly, each one reflecting not the room, but a tiny, distorted image of Amara's beautiful, smiling face. From 1,000 broken angles, the beautiful Amara smiled cruelly at them. The voice, the rustling whisper, filled the room again, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. You are too late. She is mine. The contract is in her blood, written on her soul. You cannot pray away a price that has already been paid. The spinning shards suddenly shot towards the ceiling, coalescing into a shimmering, terrifying cloud. Then, they flew towards the ancient Amara on the floor. Mama Nkechi screamed, throwing her body over her daughter. But the shards did not cut. They passed through her and through Amara like ghosts. And in that moment, the final transfer was made. Amara's aged body gave one last, shuddering sigh. And then, it was still. Utterly, completely still. The life that had been stretched and torn and finally snapped was gone. The beautiful, smiling reflections in the glass fragments winked out simultaneously. The wind died. The room was silent. Mama Nkechi wept, clutching the lifeless body of her daughter, a daughter who had died as a 90-year-old woman at the age of 25. But the story does not end there. Weeks later, a young, beautiful woman, the new intern, perhaps, or a new tenant in the building, would be walking through the forgotten parts of the city. She would feel a pull, an instinct she couldn't name. She would find a tiny, cluttered antique shop that hadn't been there the day before. And inside, on a velvet-covered stand, an ornate mirror with a frame of dark, serpent-coiled wood and a single, milky moonstone would be waiting. Waiting for someone new who felt ordinary. Someone with a deep, desperate hunger to be seen. Because the mirror was not destroyed. It was never just an object. It was a cycle. A predator. And it was forever hungry.